Okay, so we've got a little grill here. It's nice and hot, and we just put on our steaks to sear. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4 in that order before they're laid across 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you see the temperature, they came down inside to about 102, well, just changed to 100 degrees. And so we're going to give them just a minute and a half or so on this first round. These are looking a little drier than the ones we tried earlier, fresh out of the grocery store package. So we'll see what happens with these. Okay, so they've been on for about 2 minutes now on this first side. So we're just going to take them, flip them over. So we got the nice grill marks. That's looking beautiful. All right. Alright, just going to close the lid again and let them keep cooking for about another 2 minutes on this side. Okay, so we've been about another 2 minutes here, and we're just going to flip these guys over. Once more, didn't quite get as good of a char on that second side. It's okay, it's not the end of the world. We'll have a second round for it. A little concerned about my probe there, so we're going to change the angle on that one. Alright, we'll see what happens here. You'll see that we've been searing them for about 4 minutes. We're up to 154 degrees on this. It's at 4:45 now. We're going to give them about 2 minutes on this side. Flip it over, give them another 2 minutes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and flip these again. You got a little flare up coming up under that one. Probe on that third one's a little tricky there, but we got it. Okay, so this should be our last round. Notice I might be getting a better effect would I leave the lid open. I'm also concerned I would lose a lot of heat. You can see our internal temperature is already up to 185. We could probably stop searing these at any point in time. It's 187, so we've overshot our mark there as far as what we were aiming for in the middle. This thermometer does run hot, so we're probably about 10 to 12 degrees less than the 189 that it's now showing. So anyway, we're just going to let this finish up for just a couple more seconds. We'll probably pull these just a little bit early. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull these a little bit early. So, pulling them off in order here. Ooh, they do look nice. 1, 2, 3, easier said than done, and 4. Alright. So, got a couple of steaks there ready to go. We'll take those inside, cut them up, and we'll taste test them. Okay, so we've got, we're inside now. We've had a chance to rest here for a little while. Very short rest, maybe 5 or 6 minutes at this point. We're up to about 201. We're down to 192 on our thermometer. Sticking another thermometer in there that's the instant read. It's reading 158.1 and dropping just a little bit at this point. So it could be that the grill has also damaged the lead here. I'm not positive this is a high temp lead, so we might have to just replace that. This might be good for ovens, but not so good for grills and smokers, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to remove the thermometer here from this one, and also if we check our max on that, we hit 205. So 205 on the max on that. All right. And then 155.3 is that sitting there. I'll try and even use the same hull here, see what we get. 153 currently, so that should be all good. Let's grab a knife and okay, so we're going to cut into these guys and see how they're doing, how they're really looking. This is the one with the least amount of salt over here. This is not very helpful tool at the moment. My cutting board is still covered with paprika from the other project. You can see in the middle, that is definitely a medium well, it looks like. So it definitely hit a higher temperature than we were initially intending. And just cut off a couple of slices here. Let's give those a try. They look lovely. Okay. Okay. So then this is this is at 2.5 grams of salt per pound of meat. This is our 5 grams of salt per pound of meat using the kosher salt. So, not bad for what we've got meat-wise. This is also, again, the 5 grams per pound of meat, 5 grams of salt per pound of meat. This one is using the pickling salt as opposed to the kosher salt. This is the only one that uses the pickling salt. Wanted to see if it would penetrate or absorb differently into the middle of the meat and give a more even flavor, or if it made a darn bit of difference. And you can see, meat-wise, they're looking pretty good there. And our last piece here is the 12.5 grams of salt per piece. This was modeled after the capicola seasoning that Paul B's mother did. Woohoo! All right. So they all end up cooked about the same as far as doneness, but there's a nice little sampling of what we're looking at. All right, so we're going to go ahead and taste test these because these are the flat iron steak. We're just going to cut out the piece of cartilage that's right down the center of these pieces. I did wipe the knife, by the way. Did rinse and wipe the knife so that I'm not bringing the heavier amount of salt into these middle pieces here. Go ahead, babe, and grab a bite there. So this is the 2.5 grams.
Nice, it's not too salty at all. It's quite tender.
Is it salty enough?
I might salt it slightly more.
Well, it's pretty nice, actually. Ooh, all right.
Yeah, it's quite good.
I just like that. I like that. We end up with a nice, nice flavor from our searing. Also, so it's a plus. So that first one was the 2.5 grams of salt with the kosher salt, and then this one is the 5 grams of salt with the kosher salt. So if you want to grab one of these little pieces here. Presentation is getting all kinds of crazy here. Left, right, up, down, and in between. Yum. Oh, I actually like that a little bit better.
Yeah.
The saltiness isn't necessarily what you taste, but there's almost more of an even flavor. Like the taste buds are a little more active with the amount of salt in there. That's nice. I like that because you get a little bit better overall flavor coming through, in my opinion. I think it's enough salt that it enhances the meat quite nicely.
Sure. It's definitely not too salty.
What did you like as far as between those two at this point so far?
The piece I had was slightly more tender for with the lower salt content. And ironically, I tasted the salt more in the lower salt content, so I'm not sure if that's the piece I had or something with the sear, but
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I agree. The bite I had off of the first one was a little more tender also, as far as the texture of the meat, but that could also be
the steak.
that these are a little overcooked for what I was aiming for, because I did want the nice sear on there. So besides that, there's a chance for me to learn, because it's only the second time I've done the reverse sear, learning how much temperature we can gain, getting a nice sear on there, and practicing that. So, all right. So, with the flavor of that, presentation counts, right? With the flavor of the 5 grams, that's the kosher. This is the pickling. The dog is patiently waiting under the table, hoping for a bite.
It's pretty tasty. Definitely much saltier to my taste buds than the kosher salt.
I agree. I think the pickling salt did kind of, it's almost like a little bit of a higher tone, like a little bit of a zing to the salt flavor that comes through. It's not as rounded or as close to that kind of base tone of the meat itself.
It's more like if you actually just stuck salt on your tongue.
A little bit, yeah. That higher,
Yeah,
higher tone for sure. If you stuck a little kosher salt on your tongue, that's more what.
Right.
Because the pickling salt, you get a really high tone on the tongue. So
it's still pretty good, but it's definitely saltier.
Yeah, the salt did come through a little bit more. With the beef, I actually think I like the flavor of the kosher salt a little bit better.
I think so too.
Because it enhances and works with the flavor of the beef, I think, a little bit better. All right. Go ahead and grab a piece. This is the 12.5 grams of kosher salt
Try the small one.
per.
Definitely salty.
Wow.
Not as salty as I would have expected for that big of a jump, but
That's true. There's a different texture to the meat too, which could be the air that got into the package, or it could be that it was the smallest piece and it cooked a little more quickly than the others. Picked up the flavor of the sear nicely. That is too much salt for my steak.
yeah, that is. It's not. It's enough that I would call that an over salted piece of meat.
Oh yeah. That would make some pretty good jerky though.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
These warm summer days, I'm craving a little bit of salt, so that's hitting the spot. But you definitely lose most of the meat flavor in there. So the meat flavor definitely gets wiped out at the 12.5 grams. Whew. A lot. I'm going to need some water before I try anything else. All right. So now that we've both gotten a little bit of water, because that is pretty salty. I don't think I might make jerky that way, but I wouldn't plan on making a good piece of meat that way. So coming back to the 2.5 grams. I'd say the 2.5 grams is really nice. It leaves a lot of room for the meat flavor to come through. The salt comes through definitely, but not overpoweringly at all. So if you like things lightly salted, that 2.5 grams per pound is actually It's actually pretty nice. It leaves a lot of room for other flavors and other seasonings to come through.
That's what I was just going to say, is it's nicely salted, but it has plenty of room for if you wanted to then add in herbs or spices.
Definitely. Okay, so we're going to move on. Having had a little bit more water, we're going to move on to the 5 grams of salt per with the kosher and the pickling. And what I'm going to do is I want to try and just chew this and hold it in my mouth a little longer and see what happens with the flavor. If there's a distinction between the initial hit and then the aftertaste as you go with the pickling versus the other, the kosher. Starting with the kosher. Okay, so for me, that bite was just as tender as my first bite on the initial steak. So I don't think there's too much in the way of tenderness difference, the relationship to the salt. I actually like this a little bit better. There's a little more of the salt, but it also seems to bring forward a little more of the meat flavor to me still. So even adding other seasonings, I think the 5 grams per pound could be quite good, because I think the salt's going to really kind of make all the other flavors a little more active. The meat still comes through, but it's all of the, to me it's a little more of the nuances of the meat rather than just meat, right? You get the meat, you get the charring, you get it pops through a little bit more on this 5 grams.
There's a more depth of flavor to it.
Yes, that is what I was trying to say. Thank you, word girl. That's awesome. I love it. Love it. My wife's wonderful that way. Yeah, that was good. That one's staying with me too. The flavor of that one really stays with.
In a good way.
Yeah, and with the aftertaste really stays with and hangs out in your mouth a little bit more than that first piece. So if you were seasoning another piece of meat and we're going to make a gravy or something, that would bring through a lot of the flavor really nicely. I know you're not going to make a gravy out of your steak, but if you're doing a roast or something, it's a similar level of salt, just as an idea. All right, this is the pickling salt.
Definitely the higher tone. It reminds me a lot of eating a corned beef.
Yes.
That's what the flavor really reminds me of. The salt content is a corned beef.
Yeah, I absolutely, yes, I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's definitely a higher tone to the salt flavor in here. Even with the lingering after flavor in your mouth, it still maintains that higher tone. It definitely lifts the beef flavor as opposed to holding it down there like the kosher salt does. The salt flavor with the pickling, to me, comes through a lot more. So,
absolutely.
5 grams of pickling, as far as salt flavor goes, it definitely comes through more than 5 grams of the kosher salt. So the pickling salt definitely seems to penetrate into the meat more and really carries it a lot further in that respect. So good. I still have nice after flavor and everything. How I prefer my beef and everything, I think I'd lean towards the kosher salt, gravies, etc. The pickling salt might be good, but I would go lower with this, with the pickling salt. The pickling salt might be really good at about 3 grams per pound, 3.2, somewhere in that ballpark.
If you're going for something like a corned beef, I think that the pickling salt might be the way to go if that's the type of flavor that you are going for. But if you're just going for a nicely seasoned piece of steak or roasted meat, I would stick with the kosher.
Yeah, and really honestly, for the these have just salt in them. We did no other flavoring, and this really does taste a lot like corned beef. The pastrami, Reuben, corned beef kind of action on that one. Now I'm wanting a Reuben. Maybe got a little Thousand Island dressing. Yeah, that is good. It's not bad. You might be okay with like 4 grams per pound. Might be a little bit much with the pickling salt.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to do a whole nother trial with pickling salt just to find out.
I know that would just break your heart.
Another excuse to eat meat. Right. I love beef. Do you want to try anything else? Do you want another opinion on the 12? I mean,
No, I think the 12
I'm pretty clear on the 12.
The 12 would be good as, like you said, as doing something in a jerky type of preservation, but not as a serving piece of meat.
Yeah, I got to tell you that 12.5 grams plus a little bit of garlic and some cayenne pepper and some black pepper. And then turn that into a jerky. That would be pretty awesome. Go light on the garlic though, because that garlic's going to come through like
There you go. Maybe
craziness.
for next year's jerky competition.
I'll give away all the secrets. Okay. All right, this was really good. I really enjoyed it. With what we've got for our roast set up for our upcoming event, we've got about this level of the 2.5 grams of salt. I'm pretty pleased with that. We could definitely go with about double that amount of salt and have been quite all right. And if anybody is watching their sodium intake, or if it's wintertime, it's the summer, you're not sweating out as much. I think the 2.5 grams is going to be a little bit more universally accepted. The 5 grams is quite good. I think if I were going to come up with a flat, one way I'm going to season it, I might go with about 3.5 grams of salt and split the difference and go right in between them. Because this is nice, but the salt does come through, and some people wouldn't like it as much necessarily. I know I like the flavor of the salt, and then we'll... discussions about health implications is a whole separate topic, so we won't even go there. But as far as yumminess today, I think the 5 grams per pound of the kosher definitely wins.
Yep, I agree. I think that is the winner.
All right. Well, I'm going to have another bite of this.
Me too.
Thanks for watching, guys.